go over a really great device to spice up your lines called Chromatic Enclosures. Now, if you're new here to the channel, welcome. My name is Jack Roosh. But if you're not new here to the channel, then I'm sure you've heard me go on about the importance of chord tone soloing. Right? Chord tone soloing is creating solos that target the notes within the underlying chords. This is really the best way to create melodic solos that really live within the chord progression. So, for instance, if we're soloing over a chord like A7, we can play any of the four notes that make up that chord. Those are going to be our target notes. So A, C sharp, E, or G. Now, one of the limitations to playing a four-note arpeggio like that, or thinking that way, is that it can be difficult to tie together long flowing lines that connect chords together. So this is where chromatic passing tones really become super useful. And one of the best ways to use chromatic notes is with these chromatic enclosures. So a chromatic enclosure is where you're going to play a series of chromatic notes above and below the note you want to target, or vice versa. You can really mix it up and do it however you want. But for instance, if I want to target the third of this A7 chord, the note C sharp, I can do something like play chromatically down from the note E, and then jump down to C and play chromatically up to C sharp. So something like, right? And I can use that as a way to target that note and to phrase into that note on the downbeat of the chord, right? So another example would be to start a half step up on the note D and then walk chromatically up from B, right? So, and I can use that as a way to play into that chord and tie it together to the chord tones of another chord. So for instance, if I'm coming from the 5 chord, E7, and I want to target the third of that A chord, the note C sharp, when the A7 chord comes, I could play something like, right? So that's a great example of using a chromatic enclosure to connect the dots between chord tones for two different chords. In the track I played at the beginning, I soloed over a gospel-style backing track. That backing track's available to download on my Patreon if you're interested. But in that solo, I used several examples of chromatic enclosures. So let's go through a few of those examples now. So in this first example, I'm moving from the chords C sharp 7 to F sharp minor, and I start this line on the note B, which is actually the flat 7th of the C sharp 7 chord, and then play this little chromatic enclosure to target the minor third of the F sharp minor chord, the note A. So then from here I play another little enclosure to target the root note F sharp. I play, which is actually chromatic below the F sharp and then a whole step above, and then land on F sharp, and then I come down to the 5th of the chord. So that whole thing is. So this second example is actually a 2-5-1 line. The underlying chords are E minor 7, A7, and then to D7. And I play a series of chromatic enclosures that all target the third of these different chords. So the third of E minor is G, so I play, and then I come up. There's my second chromatic enclosure to the third of A7, which is C sharp. And then I play. So right there is another enclosure that lands on the third of our D7 chord, the note F sharp. So this final example happens over the chords F sharp 7 and goes to B minor 7. And to the F sharp, I play this little enclosure that targets the root of that chord, and then I play to get to the B minor 7, which is a little chromatic enclosure to the minor third of that B minor chord, and then I come down and play the 5th to kind of further outline the sound of that chord. So these are just a few examples of how you can use chromatic enclosures in your playing. It's really important to be conscious of the rhythm when you're practicing this kind of stuff. You want to line up your phrasing so that you're targeting these chord tones on the strong beats in the measure. It's a good practice to kind of try to target the chord tone on the downbeat right when the chord change happens. So hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you can get something out of this, kind of exploring with this concept and coming up with lines of your own. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button and come join me over on Patreon. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.